Austin doing the dance for you. The true depiction of the King Sailor dance with McFarlane's Resurrection the Mask.
Now we're seeing a new costume peeking into the screen, doing a dance.
That is the Perrault Grenade. Now there were Perraults, and then there was a Grand Perrault. And this one is the Grand Perrault, the Perrault Grenade. The evolution again of the whole Perrault character. Perraults were a take on the mimes of Europe. Of course, the mimes never spoke. They did all their storytelling by exaggerated movements. But coming to the Caribbean and coming to Trinidad in a depiction of the mask, the portrayers would talk and tell stories and poems, and there's always the old joke about spell Chicago, chicken in the car can't go. That's the way you spell Chicago. But again, all these costumes made of whatever materials and scraps they could put their hands on. And them carrying the whip to get the attention of the audience before they went into their oratory.
Very exciting presentation. Resurrection the Mask, McFarlane 2010, coming to you live on CTV as we enjoy a resurrection of the traditional characters of Carnival.
Characters, actually there was a time in Trinidad where there were the tents that the Perraults would go to and tell stories about what their experiences were and how they were treated by their slave owners, but they would do it in a way that would not reveal the identities of the persons, so they all had their masks on. A great aspect of our tradition of Carnival and the theater of the mask.
And the mystery and the secrecy that sort of shrouded the presentations.
And here comes the Black Indians. Now, these Indians were actually indigenous to Trinidad. The story is that one of the vessels bringing slaves crashed on St. Vincent. And the indigenous people, whether they Caribs or Arawaks, took the survivors and kept them in their own villages and amongst themselves. And they eventually copulated and brought about a darker, sort of more Africanesque race of Indians that became known as Black Indians. They came to Trinidad because they could get on vessels and their own canoes and travel from island to island. But once being in Trinidad, they were free, because slaves were not allowed to be indentured. The indigenous people were not allowed to be made into slaves. Yes. So the portrayals of these characters came about because the slaves, seeing them, felt that this was something that they would want, it represented a freedom for them.
And we know who's entering the stage now with that character.
This is the traditional dragon from Resurrection the Mask, doing the traditional dragon movements. Yes,
definitely.
But again, done in gold and copper and bronze. Kieran Huggins plays this character.
And he's playing it very well.
He loves to do the dragon dance.
Very well.
And then come the bats. The bats have a rich history in the carnival tradition. There are 65 different species of bats in Trinidad, and so this was fertile ground for masquerade, because you could make a bat with all sorts of different shapes and sizes, large wings, large head, small head. The beauty of it was, of course, being able to depict your creation, the quivering and the movements and the wings and whatever you wanted to do to show the full dance of the bat in the keeping of the tradition of the theater of the mass. So once again, Brian has brought them back in coppers and bronzes and gold. All of the headpieces being individually done with wire and paper and then fabric.
Maurice, why did Brian decide to go with the golds and the bronzes, that rich color?
Well, the whole idea of this band is that these characters, these depictions of the true costuming of the late 1800s have sort of been dwindling and been going out of our traditional carnival. But he felt that this was a point in time when they needed to be brought back so that we would keep aware of the beauty of these creations. But he wanted to bring them back in a glorious way. So he brought them back in the splendor of these brilliant colors.
Gotcha.
All of the bodysuits of these bats are sequined so that when the light hits them, you see the shimmer and the beauty of it.
And we are seeing the shimmer. They're even looking better live. You're seeing actually that glow, the glittering of the bodysuit as we enjoy Resurrection the Mask, McFarlane 2010 presentation for Carnival, a resurrection of the traditional characters of Carnival. McFarlane bringing back what has been lost and resurrecting and reincarnating these characters for us to enjoy in 2010. Some of them leaving the mask in the early 1900s, some of them leaving in the 1950s. You know, a few of them still hanging around. But today, you are getting each and every one of these characters. And we've seen the baby dolls, the Dame Lorraine, the Midnight Robbers,
the bats, the fancy sailors, the king sailors, that of course being still with us. We've seen the Borokit, the Sumari. We've seen the fancy clowns.
The cows,
the mad cows, yes.
And those sailors with the long noses.
Yes, the suck-my-nose sailors.
The suck-my-nose sailors. We learned something new today as well. I certainly did.
Of course, Dragon Mass was a very fascinating part of our carnival. One of the most appreciated and revered and looked forward to depictions in our mass. So the king of Brian's band, played by Gerard Weeks, depicted the dragon dancing,
and
a costume called the Dragon Can Dance. But the dragon was always led in by several imps. There's the bellman, ringing the bell and announcing that the dragon is approaching. There was the key master to open the locks and release the dragon. There was the axeman to cut and remove any obstacles. And just the imps pulling the dragons with the chain. There was also an imp with the devil's fork. Keep in mind that this costume is being totally carried by Mr. Weeks.
The dragon can dance.
The dragon can dance. We were particularly disappointed that the wind factor at the Savannah affected us.
I know.
But here he is now.
But he's on his feet again and showing us how well the dragon can dance.
From Resurrection the Mask.
And the last section of the band is the top top.
And now comes the final section, the jab jab. Jab jabs are a part of our mass still today, cracking their whips, removing anyone in their path. There's a mixture of the ominousness of the character from the masks that they have and the whip, but at the same time, a depiction of the costume showing somewhat of a gesture. I think a representation of the slave and the bondsmen and women saying that as much as they were being oppressed, they were still